Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, Stableford scoring system baffled, legalese disdaining YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and the changing college football world it's swimming in. I'm Eric Hansen in South Bend and wondering what the groundhog did with our spring weather. He's Tyler James, unfazed by 34-degree weather in April. Together, we're the content creators and serial football practice watchers for InsideNDSports.com. On tonight's show, it's prediction time, and we're going to parlay all of our remaining brain cells, our individual premonitions, and the 2 hours of Notre Dame football practice we saw on Saturday to make bold predictions about who each of the 22 starters will be for Notre Dame's season opener at Miami. We'll also touch on the goings-on today at the House versus NCAA settlement, plus a look ahead to Saturday's Blue Bowl game, a recruiting update, and as always, your questions. So buckle up and start filling up the question portal. This is... And if only I hadn't screwed up the video.
well, we took turns because I hit the wrong one at the very beginning. So
okay, that's what got it going, because then it was like 17 seconds into it or something. I thought, well, maybe I need to reset this. And then I thought, oh, well, it worked out.
Yeah.
Eric Schrauth here and Jeff Stevens. And lots of others, it looks like.
Yeah, so. I'm not sure. Everyone saw your part, I assume, or at least I captured it on YouTube. I don't know what. Sometimes it goes live at different moments, so I'm not sure what they caught of the beginning with me messing up. But
I'll blame it on the hypnotic nature of our countdown music now, which I can't stand.
Yeah, we need to come up with our own. I'd like to.
We'll get Piano Man Steve to overdub it for us.
Yeah, and we could probably do something better than the boring numbers that put you to sleep. But we can find time to do that maybe this off season once things slow down. But right now things haven't really slowed down. But we will forge on. And Eric got really excited after seeing Saturday scrimmage, so he's got a big task for us. But we appreciate everyone who's tuning in live right now. We appreciate your feedback and questions during the show. If you're watching us on replay, make sure you leave a comment on this video as well. Of course, everyone who is watching should be subscribed to us here on Inside ND Sports, the YouTube channel. So fix that with a click. If you haven't done so, just hit subscribe. And if you're not subscribed to us over at InsideNDSports.com, you can do that with a 30-day free trial using promo code NDYT. That will get you access to all of our premium football analysis and recruiting coverage, which is keeping us pretty busy these days as the Irish keep picking up momentum with all the spring visitors coming to town. There is a link to use the promo code in the video description below.
Okay. Well, our opening drive, as I mentioned, prediction time, opening night outcome for every position battle. So we're not just predicting. We're not predicting about the blue gold game starters. This is about who's going to be on the field when the Irish play the Hurricanes August 31st at Hard Rock Stadium. This follows our 2-hour window to review practice number 9 of 15 this spring on Saturday, which included lots of scrimmage time, more than 60 plays, and typically a Notre Dame football game will have about 63, 64 offensive plays. We'll also give kind of our confidence level. We'll throw that in there of our prediction and mention key rotational players if that position rotates. Obviously, I don't think quarterback's going to rotate, but we'll see if Tyler predicts that. So why don't we start on offense so we don't save the quarterbacks to the end, but we'll save them to the end of the offense and start with left tackle. And I think this is a really difficult one.
Yeah, as of today, left tackle, I went with Anthony Knapp. I have not been swayed by anything to date to feel differently. So I'm going with Anthony Knapp, and I went with high, medium, or low for my confidence levels, and I put that one in a medium. I don't feel certain about Anthony Knapp being the starting left tackle, but I'm not sure there's I've been convinced otherwise that he won't.
Right. And when we get to the end of this position group, the 5 of them, we can talk about some of the other guys that might be in the running for starting positions. I also went with Anthony Knapp. I'll use your high, medium, and low scale. I was going to do 1 to 10, and that goes against my nature. I'm always complaining when people want me to do it, and then to volunteer myself for that. I'll go with medium as well. I could see other options. The one thing that throws me a little bit of a curve with it too is that Joe Rudolph doesn't tip his hand in the spring too much. You think about what Anthony Knapp was doing last spring, and he was bouncing back and forth between tackle and center, and then really didn't surface as a left tackle starting candidate until about 2 weeks before the season started. Okay, left guard.
Left guard, I have Billy Schrauth, and I went high with my confidence level there.
Left guard too for me and Billy Schrauth high as well. To me, he's going to be a starting guard whether they decide it's best right or left, because he's done both and done well at both. But yeah, Billy Schrauth left guard. Center.
I went with Ashton Craig with a medium confidence level. That's assuming he continues to be on a path to do that health-wise. But certainly nothing that we've seen this spring, in my opinion, has allowed us to see another center emerge. So I'm going with Craig.
Right. They've dabbled with Sullivan Absher there a little bit, I think, just in case. And I think if there was big concerns about whether Ashton Craig would have been ready for the season, they would have said, Pat Coogan, come on back. And that fact that he was in the portal pretty quickly after the national championship game, I'm going with high confidence that it'll be Ashton Craig, and I'm giving his knee credit there. Right guard.
Right guard, I went with Charles Jagusa. Given that we haven't said his name yet, that's probably a pretty easy guess. Just based off what we've seen of him this spring and the way Joe Rudolph spoke about him as a potential guard, I feel like that's what I'm most confident in terms of where Jagusa could play come the fall.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Charles there as well. At the beginning of spring, I would have flip-flopped. Well, I actually did flip-flop Jagusa and Knapp, but I'm pretty convinced that this is where it's going to end up, that he's going to be a guard. And then finally, right tackle.
Yeah, easy one here. Emil Wagner high. Obviously, there could be a chance that Notre Dame flips him to left tackle, but I don't necessarily see that happening. So I'm going with Wagner at right tackle.
And then for me, the guys that could get into the mix, I think there's really only three that make sense: Garby Lambert, Sullivan Absher, and Will Black. But I think Garby Lambert of those three makes the most sense in getting involved, and he now has a shoulder surgery rehab going on. Marcus Freeman announced that after practice on Saturday, and so he's out for the rest of spring, but he'll be back for the fall. So let's move to tight end. Who do you have at tight end, Tyler?
Well, let's answer this one since it's specific to it, so we don't have to circle back later. Okay. Jeff Stevens said, "Did Lambert drop off your predictions based off his recent surgery?"
I would have had him in the same spot. I'm less convinced that he might make a run now, but I still think he could. I think he's got enough time to do that. But yeah, it would have been nice for him to have all summer to be able to do everything. I saw him Saturday as I was getting ready to go upstairs, and his arm was in the sling. But there's still things he can do with his lower body, and it's not like he's lacking strength or bulk in his upper body. But no, it did not affect me, to answer your question.
Yeah, it didn't necessarily impact mine either. I think there was a path for this spring that maybe would have led me to putting Lambert there, because the injury happened. That is part of why that didn't happen this spring, but I don't think that's necessarily the only reason. I still think there is a chance that could happen. Like you mentioned, this surgery doesn't totally rule him out as someone who could ascend into the starting lineup. I think if Anthony Knapp gets moved down to center, if Ashton Craig isn't ready to go, then that opens the door for a possibility there. There are a number of different ways that maybe it could lead to Garby Lambert getting in the starting lineup. But I just think as we stand here today, it's less certain that Lambert would make that leap right now.
Right. And we should point out too, we saw practice number 9. A lot of people think, blue gold game, practice 10 or practice 12. or practice 15 or whatever. It is practice 12. There are 2 more practices this week. There are 3 after the blue gold game, which I wasn't around for the 1930s, believe it or not. So I don't know if they did have practices after the blue gold game, but certainly since I've been covering Notre Dame, that's never happened. Okay, tight end. Who do you have?
Eli Raridan, high.
Eli Raridan, high. I think let's talk a little bit about rotation here. To me, Bauman's put himself in the mix there, and then Washington and James Flanagan are going to be really interesting to watch in June in terms of rotation. Do you see it the same way, or do you see Jack Larson jumping up there?
I don't necessarily know that I'm ready to predict Larson there yet. I don't know that I would say with a ton of confidence that Bauman is ready for that either. I just got to see more of him because unfortunately for him, has had such a injured career. But Ty Washington was at practice on Saturday. We should mention that. The Arkansas transfer who will not join the team until the summer. And so he'll have a chance to get in the rotation. I would imagine he will. And James Flanagan is someone who I considered as one of the most likely to play early as a freshman based on his physical preparedness. I think he would be able to get into the mix potentially as well. So we'll see how that plays out when both of those guys get here in the summer.
Okay, we're going to do the 3 receivers next and then talk about them as a group. There are 11 scholarship receivers on the roster eventually. Not all of them are here in the spring yet. 12 if you include Tyler Buckner. And then we can talk about how deep we think the rotation is, but let's do the starters first, and let's start with field receiver.
I had Jordan Faze on there.
I have Jordan Faze on there too.
Confidence.
How high is your confidence? High?
I would say high. Yeah.
I'm high on all 3 of my starters.
Same.
So slot receiver.
Jaden Greathouse.
I copied off your paper on that too. And boundary receiver.
Malachi Fields.
Agreed. Now, this is where I think it gets dicey. Let's say you had to come up with a rotation that ended at 6 rather than 8. I think 8 is kind of easier to get to. I think 6 is really difficult. Who would the next 3 be for you? Who would you have in the rotation?
Will Pauling as the easy 4 there. There is a world where maybe Jaden Greathouse becomes the field receiver again, and Will Pauling's the starting slot receiver. I think there's a chance at that. After that, I would probably go Micah Gilbert and KK Smith, although I really want to replace KK Smith with Elijah Burris based on what we've seen this spring. KK Smith is another guy who's struggled to stay healthy, and I don't know that I've seen a ton of flashes from him when we've got a chance to see him healthy in practices. Burris has looked good as an early enrolled freshman. It's hard to get on the field as a freshman at receiver, so I would lean towards KK Smith, which is why if you make me pick, that's who I'd pick. But I'd hear you out if you wanted to include Burris.
Okay, well, I'm going to advocate for somebody else. I'm going Pauling, Gilbert, and Cam Williams, and nothing I've seen suggests that, but I think that Cam has that ability. Now, what's going to happen for Cam to do that is he's going to have to move back over to the field receiver when everybody's healthy and on campus. So Malachi Fields and Gilbert would be the 2 boundary guys, Greathouse and Pauling the slots, and then Cam and Jordan Faison. But this is like going counterintuitive for me, because when I look at them as well, I see Burris as the person in that little window that we saw as the one that's showing the most promise to be that guy. But I think there's a lot to like about Cam Williams. He is at the boundary receiver. But again, he would be the 3rd option if he stays there. Okay. Running back.
Jeremiah Love next.
Okay. And then as we're looking at, we would agree Jadarian Price, Aeneas Williams, and then if they're going to cut it off at 4 backs, who's your number 4?
Whoever decides to stay between Jabron Payne and Keatron Young. They both could certainly stay. But I think you would be fine with either of those 2 options. I'm not sure that there's a clear-cut answer between the 2. I think Jabron Payne may have been the guy if Dylan McCullough was still here,
Yes,
because
I would
he
agree.
trusts him so much. I think the blank slate maybe levels the playing field between those two. So
to me, what does Jabron Payne give you that the other three guys can't? Kedron Young has a different body type, and that's where I think he has an advantage, because I think Aeneas Williams does everything Jabron Payne does.
Yeah, I think Jabron might be a little bit more physical of a runner than Aeneas Williams, at least in between the tackles. But I think Kedron Young is too. So,
well, it was hard to tell Saturday because there weren't good offensive lines. And
no, this is based off of other perceptions than what we saw on Saturday for sure.
Okay, now we get to the big one on offense, and then we can decide whether we want to pause for questions. And I hope you guys are playing along in the chat. Quarterback.
I went with CJ Carr, and with a confidence level of low. This is the first low I've had. I don't feel confident for sure where this is going. And I don't. CJ Carr has been my prediction previously, and I don't know that I've been convinced to move off of that yet. But I don't know that I also haven't seen anything that's like, okay, yeah, this is going to be CJ Carr's job. So I went with Carr and low. What'd you do?
I went with CJ Carr, and I went medium.
All right. What do you think is the difference between my low and your medium?
My intuition, and I mean, well, and just what I think, what I believe Denbrock thinks, what I think is running in Denbrock's mind, just having known him for a long time and how he processes things. I think that's where he thinks it would go. He hasn't said that to me, but that's where I think, just having known him and know people around him, I think that's what he thinks how it'll play out. But again, there's lots of time to make a different route, and there was nothing that Carr did where I went, oh wow, maybe he's not that good.
Yeah.
So I was, the little bits that he was was enough to kind of drag me along with my narrative. So speaking of narratives, do we want to take questions, or we want to do defense first?
We some of them are questions for later, and some of them are defensive specific. There's one here from Jeff Stevens for the Blue Gold game, over under Jeremiah Love with 6 carries.
For me, under. I'm not sure if it'll be. I'm not sure if I could have -1 carries. I think it might be, but I don't know that they'll play Jeremiah Love in it. He had a hamstring injury that Marcus Freeman didn't deem serious. And really, what does he need to show you in the Blue Gold game that you don't already know?
Right.
I wouldn't say that he's not necessarily done for spring, because they may have him do some things in the practices, and especially non-contact stuff, that follow the Blue Gold game. But I'm going with under 6. How about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I'd go with under. I think given the hamstring issue that just popped up, it seems highly unnecessary to have him play on Saturday, even though I'm sure fans would like to see it. So I would go under.
Okay.
And that's basically it. We have some other questions. Frank Serra has a question about rosters expanding, and we'll get into that topic later too. So
okay, sounds good. Okay, Viper end. This one is tough, and there's a lot of rotation. So maybe we'll talk about the starter and then who we think will be behind the starter, because I think there's some pretty good depth here at all 4 of these positions.
Yeah, I had my list has like guys in parentheses behind them, and I think that would rotate, and every one of them has. Every one of the defensive line positions has a name. But for my Viper end, I went with Jordan Botelho with a medium confidence level. Would not be shocked if it was Boubacar Traore, but I went with Botelho here.
For opening night starter, I would go with Botelho too, with medium confidence. I think 2 reasons. One, he's a 6th-year senior, and I think he's earned that with his play last year. And I think he's a little bit ahead of Boubacar in terms of their timelines. They didn't have identical injuries. Boubacar was an ACL. Jordan's was a patella tendon. And from my understanding, and I don't think Rob Hunt said anything to dissuade me from thinking this, that Botello was on a faster track back. But I think Boubacar could be the starter in time, but they both would play. And then who else would be in their rotation? Gosh, you could go down to Junior Tui Halamaka next, and then Logan Thomas if he ever gets above 213 pounds. And I think he's down the road. I think he's going to be pretty good once he grows up. How about you? Do you like that depth?
Yeah, no, I think there's good depth there. I think they're deeper at the Viper end than the other end position. And so it'll be interesting to see if there's something done to even that out. But yeah, the Viper end position, I think, is a strength going into the season, as long as those guys at the top get back healthy and stay healthy.
Now, here comes, I think, maybe the surprises so far of the spring, and we'll see if it holds up. And again, it was against a lot of, mostly, other than Charles Jagas, guys that won't be starting next year on the offensive line, but defensive tackle.
Yeah, the interior is still a bit muddy to me. I don't know that I have a ton of confidence with any of them for certain, and I think there will obviously be a lot of rotation. So I went Jason Onye as my defensive tackle.
I went with Jason as well, and I'm going to go with high confidence there. I think anybody that's on the journey that he's on and has the talent that he has, he's going to be hard to beat out now. He's like a freight train. And then let's do nose guard, and then we'll talk about the backups and the rotational guys, because I think there's going to be some flip-flopping. But nose guard, who's your nose guard?
I have Gabriel Rubio at nose guard. I put medium confidence there. It could certainly be Jared Dawson as well. I think both those guys are going to play a lot and be the leading nose guards.
Yeah, I'm going with Gabe Rubio, medium confidence. For me, what do you do with Donovan Heinisch? I moved him back over to defensive tackle. He can play both. I have Donovan Heinisch and Elijah Hughes in that rotation. I have Jared Dawson and Sean Sevillano as rotating behind Rubio. Now, where's Armel Mucum and some of these other guys? I think they may go deeper than 3 deep, but those are my depth pieces. How about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I agree with all of those. I think Mucum played well on Saturday from what we saw. Heinisch did not participate in the competitive portion of practice, so didn't get a chance to see his latest developments there. But we know that Al Washington always has good things to say about Donovan Heinisch, so I would not be surprised to see him in the mix. I think there's a lot of numbers there. The hope would be that you can rotate more. I would imagine Notre Dame's going to rotate its defensive tackles more than it did last season. And hopefully the depth is also quality depth, and you feel really good about whoever's in there.
And then finally, in this part of the position group, field end.
Yeah, I went with Joshua Burnham, high confidence, even though I'm very impressed with Bryce Young. They're both talented players. They're both going to play a lot, but I think Burnham, as the veteran, will get the starting nod.
I would agree. It's his more, I wouldn't say more natural position, but I think it's the position where he's got the highest ceiling. He had to play Viper out of necessity because of injuries last year. Bryce Young is a man, and I really like Chris Burgess coming in June to make some noise and be maybe the number 3 guy there. How about you?
I'm not as certain. I like Chris Burgess as a prospect. I think he's very raw. He's physically put together, but I think he has a bit of a ways to go in terms of technique and pass rush sort of skill set. So I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if he does, but I wouldn't count on it necessarily.
Maybe they could just station him outside the visitors' tunnel and scare people when they're running, because he is physically impressive.
He is an impressive dude for sure.
Okay. The linebackers, again, it's kind of weird doing the depth chart because they do a 5-man rotation and probably will still do that, but let's do it the traditional way anyways. Starting middle linebacker.
Drake Bowen, high.
Okay, me too. Starting weak side linebacker.
Jalen Sneed, high.
I would agree with you. And Rover.
I went with Jaden Osbury and high. I would go low in terms of the odds that the position is actually a starting position, but
Right.
I think Jaden Osbury is the guy that's will play there the most of Notre Dame's linebackers.
I would agree. And then I think we both have Kingston Viliamo-Asa and Madden Faremo as part of that five-man linebacker rotation. KVA could play either of those inside spots. I would think Madden Faremo might be able to play all of them, or at least weak side and rover. I would imagine you have the same people there.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Osbury's ahead of Faremo in terms of playing those inside positions too. We're not gonna. I don't think Notre Dame's gonna pigeonhole him in as solely a rover. So he will get some playing time in the inside linebacker positions, which he did last year too. So it may be hard for Faremo to get on the field, but he is going to make it hard to keep him off the field too.
Right. It was interesting on our special recruiting football never sleeps on Friday. Tom Lemming thinks Anthony Sacca is really, really good, but he thinks he's going to end up at Viper eventually. What do you think about that?
I could see that. He's grown quite a bit in his high school career, and I think he may continue to outgrow the linebacker spot. And Notre Dame's depth at linebacker is so good. Viper depth in terms of young guys isn't as great.
Right.
So that could be. I could see that wouldn't be a shocking thing. I think there's maybe some similarities between the high school versions of Joshua Burnham and Anthony Sacca.
Okay. Boundary cornerback.
Boundary cornerback Leonard Moore, high.
Yeah, high. That's an easy one.
I'm high on all these until we get to the other safety spot.
Field cornerback.
Christian Gray.
Okay, and what do you see the rotation looking? Who do you think that they'll be able to trust in August and September, rotating in at some of the corner spots?
It's hard to say because we don't know what it's going to look like for Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden, who might be the most talented cornerbacks in the freshman class. But Creed Thomas, I think, is a very developed and guy that is capable of playing as a freshman at cornerback, and he's impressed this spring. So the depth there is great, even though there's not a lot of experience. So, and I think Notre Dame's getting in a spot where it has more confidence in Carson Hobbs too, who it didn't necessarily have that confidence in him last year. Otherwise, they wouldn't have done all the moving around of guys they did to sort of keep him off the field in big moments. So, I think Notre Dame could have two guys at each position potentially as backups that you're confident in playing. So Creed Thomas and Carson Hobbs are making cases this spring, and I would expect Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden to show and impress in the fall, unless Notre Dame gets crazy and wants to move one of them to receiver or something like that. But I think they're both very talented corners.
Yeah, it amazes me. I think they could have a lot of guys that they trust. Chance Tucker's also in the mix. He's coming back from an ACL. I think he's due back maybe in August. And certainly they don't have to rush him back from an injury. And I think he's going to have a hard time jumping over any of the freshmen and sophomores there that are sophomore Carson Hobbs. Okay, nickel.
Devontae Smith.
Okay, strong safety.
Adon Schuler.
And free safety.
I went with Jalen Stroman and low for now. This is kind of, I don't really have a ton of confidence of which way this is going. I think it's very wide open from my perspective. I think Luke Talich and Tay Johnson are also legitimate contenders here. I mean, that's, if you're listening to me, that's ruling out Kennedy Urlacher, which I don't know that I would totally want to do. So there are some options there, but even though Stroman missed the spring because of his broken collarbone that he still needed to heal, I'm still leaning towards the Virginia Tech transfer to win out that job.
I also went with Devontae Smith, also with Adon Schuler. Free safety, I'm going with my bold prediction, bold as in crazy, and I'm going with Tay Johnson. Um, I just love where his career might be headed. And the thing about it is I could see them playing seven safeties. They really like Jalen Stroman. That's what makes it difficult to make this prediction. And I think Jalen Stroman is going to be healthy, and it's going to be hard to keep him off the field. And so this may be way more of a timeshare. I don't know if Stroman ends up rotating in for Schuler. I think they're going to use a lot of their safeties and packages. Luke Talich, Jadon Blair, Ethan Young, Kennedy Urlacher. I mean, there's seven guys that I think can play. I'm probably giving Ethan Long maybe a little bit more credit, but I looked at him, 6'3", and he's put together, and he didn't disappoint in the little bit that we saw him on Saturday. So I'm not ruling him out either. And there's more guys that we aren't mentioning, but I think those seven are going to be important on special teams and other roles as well. Do you want to add anything to that? You want to tell me how crazy I am to pick Tay Johnson?
I mean, I don't know that you're crazy. He's someone that, I mean, I made time to write a story about him and interview him leading up to one of the bowl games, or the playoff games, because I think his potential is very high. He didn't get a chance to necessarily show that this past season because of his early season injury, but he showed some flashes on Saturday for sure.
Yeah, I mean he's super fast. He's got really good coverage skills. Just a really good athlete, and he's got length too. It's pretty interesting. Okay,
hold on. I got a follow up for you.
Okay,
what is your Tay Johnson is an exciting prospect, and like you mentioned, he can fly around. But if you have such a good secondary, which we believe Notre Dame does, are you more interested in putting a guy that you just know you can rely on because you sort of have playmakers elsewhere, or do you want to introduce another playmaker to the group? I think that might be the question that Notre Dame could be facing going into the fall.
If Jalen Stroman had played more than just the opener in 2024, I would say no brainer. I'm going with the safe pick there and bringing Tay along, and maybe that's what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that he's missed so much time and is missing spring practice, Tay Johnson is kind of doing what Adon Schuler did last spring when Rod Hurd too wasn't here, and making the most of his opportunity. And so I think I would go with Tay Johnson again. Had Jalen Stroman played last year at Virginia Tech, then for me it would be an easy decision to pick him. But I know Notre Dame likes him a lot.
All right. We could throw this question in. I don't have a good answer for it, but I'll address it since Brian brought it into the discussion and we're talking about the safeties. Guys, were the strong safeties running the alley like you would in cover 4? Just reading the tea leaves and hearing the corners talk about zone and a few reporters talking about safeties in the line of scrimmage.
You know what, Brian? I'll be honest with you. I wasn't really trying to dissect scheme and so forth. I was looking more who was on the field with who was first team, second team, third team, and their individual traits. So I was not looking at scheme at all because I figured that was either going to be a red herring or it was going to be vanilla. So I wasn't even looking at that. I know Marcus got asked about zone defense, and I think it caught him off guard a little bit in the press conference.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going. I mean, they know the days that we're in there and the days we're not. I don't think they're going to show us what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm not defensive coverage smart enough to be able to diagnose that while trying to track who's out in the field and everything else that's going on when we're trying to make as many observations as we can. So I don't have an answer for that question, and we don't have access to replays like you would with game film or stuff like that. So
Brian, we're going to have to bring you with us to practice next time, but we're going to put you to work. If you come with us, you got to write a story.
Yeah, we need to bring someone that's just in charge of tracking what coverages they're running. All right. You want to get into some more questions, Eric?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do some more questions.
All right. Jeff Stevens said, what position is/was the most difficult to predict?
For me, it was left tackle on offense, and on defense, it would be that safety next to Adon Schuler.
To me, it was the safety and then quarterback. Those are the two that I put as low, and I don't know that I did that intentionally, but going back through my list, those are the only two that I put low confidence levels at, and that makes sense to me because I think there's you're three deep in terms of legitimate competitors at those positions, so that makes it harder to predict. Brian said, any thoughts on Elijah Hughes after seeing him in person? Looks quick on film like a young Howard Cross.
I watched him a little bit more in this practice than I have in drills and so forth. When I saw him in some of the drills, Dawson is just such a big dude. He kind of makes Hughes look smaller. But Hughes, I thought the times that 56 jumped out at me, he jumped out at me. I thought, okay, this is a guy that could help them. I don't know that I'd compare him to Howard Cross other than they're wearing the same number, but I think that he's a guy that will help them. That's why I put him in my rotation.
Yeah, he's someone that I don't have a great read on. Like, is he going to play more than Armel Mukum next season? I don't know that I have a good answer for that. So I think there's a chance he could have limited opportunities this coming season, because if Mukum is your third defensive tackle, how much are you playing your fourth defensive tackle? So I think there's a chance that maybe he doesn't get a lot of playing time, and that's one of the positions that how the depth plays out. I don't know that I have a great grasp on, but I do think that there looks to be some potential there. To me, he's not someone that walks in and you're like, oh man, Notre Dame has to find room for him right away. So I'll be interested to see what sort of development he makes during his Notre Dame career and how quickly that leads to playing time. Mike DeVoy asks, is the shortage of rovers a reflection of how often the defense is playing nickel?
C, yes. I think I'm curious how that position is going to evolve under Chris Ash, because Notre Dame has done so well with getting guys out of the portal and having these guys that are physical enough to play the run. And then you're like, how often are they going to find a Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah that does everything that the old Clark Lee,
right,
Mike Elko rover does? And so it's going to be, and I don't even know if it's going to be, in talking to Chris Ash, I think I even asked him about the rover, and he's like, yeah, it's another linebacker. It doesn't sound like, oh, wait a second, it's, because Elko, it's this combination of safety and linebacker hybrid, and Chris Ash just sees it as another linebacker. So I think that's why, and I think that's why it's difficult to get all these guys on the field. You talk about Preston Zinner. I think Preston Zinner could play at some schools, and Bodie Cahoon and Teddy Rizak, and it seems like it's just a long way off before they're going to see the field.
Yeah, I would agree with everything you said there, and I think Devontae Smith in particular as the starting nickel is someone that brings physicality to that position, and himself lessens the need to play maybe some rover in some situations.
Right, and the you think about those safeties, and if you wanted to put an extra safety on the field somewhere, like in a 6 defensive back package, that Apache position that Al Golden had, wow, there's a lot of choices there too.
All right, Beefeater says, any field goal kicker competition this year?
In Marty Biaggi talking on Friday, he doesn't sound like there's going to be. I think where there might be a competition is with kickoffs. I think they're open to whether it's going to be Noah Burnett or James Rendell might take a whack at it, or Eric Schmidt coming in June, the freshman, might get a whack at kickoffs. They're remaking Noah Burnett's swing. That's one thing Marty Biaggi talked about, just like he remade the swings of the other two kickers he's coached at Notre Dame, and they've been better off for it. But I think they're pretty confident Burnett's going to be the field goal kicker, even though he kind of missed one on Saturday.
All right.
Tyler loves kicker questions.
Yeah, well, I don't have a lot of knowledge to improve upon what you already said there. I was looking at the other questions, and I think we can hold. I guess the Scott Fegan we can throw in now. Guys, more of a philosophical question: does a 16-game season take more out of the players or coaches?
Well, the coaches get paid for it. I guess the players do too.
They do now.
I mean, the players have the physical and mental grind, so I would say the players, but the coaches have to do everything that they have to do in terms of hiring coaches, going to WWE events, recruiting, being a dad. So I don't think it's easy on anybody, but I think the players have that extra physical grind part that the coaches don't have to deal with.
Yeah, and while the coaches have to deal with recruiting, the student athletes have to deal with school. So
exactly,
they
didn't get a break. I mean, usually they have, a break from school or football or, a little bit of both at different times, and they didn't get it. I mean, by the time their playoff run was over, they were back in school.
Right.
So they didn't get to go home.
Yeah. So I think it takes more out of the players. Maybe if you're talking about guys that aren't playing a lot, maybe you could say that the coaches have it worse than some of those guys. But in general, I would say it's more taxing on the players because of the physical requirements and beating that you take. Even if you're a practice player, you're getting out there and you're getting bruised up on a weekly basis. All right, let's proceed with the outline, Eric.
Okay, so again, Saturday was practice 9 to 15. Numbers 10 and 11 will take place this week, closed to the media, ahead of Saturday's Blue Gold game at Notre Dame Stadium with a 2 p.m. kickoff on Peacock. 3 more practice sessions will take place after the Blue Gold game. It's important to note that the final transfer portal window opens April 16th and closes April 25th. More on that later in the show because nothing was decided at the key court hearing Monday in Oakland, California regarding the evolving college sports model, including scholarship limits and roster limits. But there were some interesting comments from the lawyers and from the judge on that, and we'll get to that in a bit. Let's talk about the Blue Gold game format. Do you want to describe it, Tyler?
Offense versus defense and a scoring format that I don't understand.
Right. It's kind of the Stableford thing, like points for a first down, points for a third down stop. And you're just going to have to look at the scoreboard and go, they used it during the scrimmage that we watched on Saturday, and the defense won 25-23. Okay. What meaningful, if anything, do you expect fans to get to see?
To me, I mean, we are on Football Never Sleeps, which Joe just said Football Never Sleeps, but what about naps? This is a Football Never Sleeps show, so I would say anytime there's football, it's meaningful. But it depends on how much meaning you want to draw from it. I mean, to see the quarterbacks in action, folks are going to be able to make their own judgments and probably overreact and make their opinions hardened than they maybe should. We'll see some. I think the depth and questions about the defensive line that we were talking about, I think that will be on display in terms of the progress that Notre Dame's made there. And I think even though there's a lot of young receivers, I think we're going to see some opportunities for those guys to make some plays. So even though Notre Dame has a great secondary, I do think some of our receivers will probably have a couple nice moments, which Notre Dame fans, I think, are eager to see.
Yeah, I think even in a vanilla format, you'll get to see the speed of the receivers. You'll get to see some coverage abilities of the DBs. You'll get to see the running backs being beyond Jeremiah Love, but they're running behind kind of icky offensive lines. Linebacker speed instincts, interior defensive line talent development was what I jotted down. Do you think having the Blue Gold game as practice number 12, given the length of the 2024 season and the oddly late placement of Easter is a good compromise.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. It is a bit of an odd setup, but like the blue gold game and most spring scrimmages elsewhere are like it doesn't have to be the last one for fans to be entertained by it, right? Like I think that's as much of a big thing as anything. I mean, Marcus Freeman spoke to that. Like he thinks it's important for folks that maybe can't afford to or have the time to in the fall get around the team in maybe a more relaxed setting and get to know Notre Dame football a little bit better by getting to the blue gold game, regardless of what the blue gold game looks like or who's playing in it, how competitive it is. So I think it makes sense in terms of the timing that it's not Easter weekend, because then that makes it harder for Notre Dame players to get back and be with their families for Easter if they want to. It makes it easier for people to get to the game and not have to worry about Easter planning around it. And so I think it makes a lot of sense the way it's worked out. It's been strange, and the way that the spring has unfolded and the fact that we're already at the blue gold game, which it seems like spring practice almost just started, but the way they've planned it out and then having some practices afterward, I think Notre Dame's getting to take advantage of a full spring while also giving itself as much time as it could to recover from last season.
Okay, we will have a wrap-up session with Marcus Freeman after the 15th practice has concluded. What are the three most important things about this team we should know then that we don't know now?
Yeah, I struggle with this one, Eric. I was
Me too.
my head.
That was actually a crappy question, but let's try to power through it. You want me to go first?
Well, so here's the one thing that I thought. So I think April 23rd is when we're scheduled. Certainly that may change. The portal date that you mentioned, it runs through April 25th. So maybe we will know by then if all three of Notre Dame's top quarterbacks are staying. Like I would think they wouldn't wait to the very last minute to enter, but maybe that does happen. I don't know. So that was the only thing that really came to mind to me. I don't, just based on what we do or don't know and the status of players that are involved and not involved this spring, I'm not sure that there's a lot of things that we'll learn in these next couple weeks. What influenced, or where did this question lead you?
I kind of came up with four things, but none of our answers that are any better than anything Eric Swope said in the comments today. One is, I think you'll have more of a definition of where you want to go with the wide receivers. Who's in the rotation? Do you want to move Cam Williams back? I think same with the safety situation. I think you'll have a better feel for what you'll want to set as the agenda for the summer, how deep you want to go. And again, Chris Ash will have some ideas. Wow, we have all these safeties. How can we use them, get those guys on the field? I think if there's a chance Notre Dame would add from the portal, I think you'd be able to make that determination. I don't think there's a position group that's screaming for that. If there were an injury in the last 6 practices,
right?
If maybe the tight ends weren't as solid as you thought and you weren't really sure about Washington and Flanagan helping you come June. And then finally, who you really need to pay attention to among the June enrollees. Now you see, okay, this is what our team looks like without these 2 transfers that are June enrollees and without the 12 freshmen. Who do we need to get good eyes on this summer in terms of who might be able to help us right out of the chute? Those are the things I came up with.
All right.
Okay.
I think that makes sense.
Okay. House versus NCAA settlement hearing. As expected by those who are following it closely, federal judge Claudia Wilkin did not make a final ruling from the bench today. It's not like Judge Judy. And all the decisions affecting the future structure of college sports were deferred. But it wasn't a nothing burger. There were quite a few breadcrumbs left during the hearing about where some of this might be headed. I think for us and where we want to focus on, and I think this is most immediate concern for a lot of schools, is roster limits and scholarship limits, because the portal period's coming up. Notre Dame is at 95 scholarships right now. They're 10 over the existing limit, 10 under the anticipated limit, with some walk-ons possibly on the chopping block if and when the new limits go into place. And we're not sure how fast this process is going to move now. But one thing that Claudia Wilkin was suggesting is that you don't cut people that are currently on rosters, that they are grandfathered into the kind of old way of doing things, and then you kind of merge. So they're looking for the NCAA, they're looking for the lawyers to kind of figure out, okay, we need a new way to kind of look at this where somebody's not going to have to jump into the portal. That may be the smartest thing here. Tyler, I'll just kind of throw my 2 cents worth in. If Notre Dame, let's say they're still have 90 scholarship players and they need to get down to 85, I do think there's enough wiggle room with the current NIL structure to do what Notre Dame did last year when they were at 86, and that's make a situation financially match what other scholarship players. So I don't necessarily think this is going to be a crisis for Notre Dame. I think they're going to be able to handle it as long as they kind of know if the goalposts are going to move again before the next season starts. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I wanted to throw this just as a quick summation, and I think you covered most of it. I think maybe, I'm not sure if you said anything about the second part of this tweet that I'll read here from Ross Dellinger, which happened while we were live. He said the final House settlement hearing is over. This was from 7:33 Eastern. The gist: Judge Claudia Wilkin gave indication that she'd approve the NCAA's House settlement if changes are made to roster limits, possibly phasing them in, which Eric highlighted. And the other part was the inclusion of future athletes in the class, tweaking the language. And so that's I think there's concern over like this being a settlement that would include people that have no say in it being something they're agreeing to in terms of being a settlement. So to me, it's been interesting. Like, I feel like everyone wants certainty from something that isn't certain yet. Like we got a question earlier from Frank Sarah, when will the rosters expand to 105? We have no idea. Like we can't tell you the answer to that. This was the next date that we thought we would get closer to an answer. And I think,
and we did get closer. We just still in gray area.
Right. Like I thought Marcus Freeman sort of handled it well when asked about it the other day. He's like, we have a plan, but I can't really spend much time worrying about that plan until we know if that plan is the one we have to use or we have to make adjustments or whatnot. So in terms of like the numbers, like you mentioned, I think that probably makes sense that if you got a couple extra scholarship guys that you don't want to chase off, making sure that they're taken care of through a collective can maybe help that out. But otherwise, like I think like if you're trying to put yourself in the safest position and you don't have answers for this, like maybe you would lean into chasing off those scholarship guys more than the walk-on guys. I think previously you could lean into maybe like chasing off some of the lower end the walk-on guys because you're worried about a roster limit rather than the scholarship limit of 85, which has been the most important number and still remains that until the rules change. So I think certainly we could get more clarity before the portal opens. I don't know that we know for sure how soon this will proceed and when that comes into effect. Because like the idea of phasing it in, it's like, well, so when do you get grandfathered in? If like, can I just add a bunch of guys to my roster right now and they automatically get grandfathered in? Like I'd be curious to see how that influences what folks are doing now in terms of this idea of roster limits and players on the roster being grandfathered in.
Okay. Do we want to take another round of questions before we hit recruiting?
Let's do it. Irish fan says, so the last practices will overlap with transfer portal window. Might that complicate roster decisions?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that players will have some idea of where they stand with the team. I think Marcus is pretty transparent with it. I mean, yeah, you had a whole bunch of guys from one position leave all of a sudden. Might be difficult in practice, but I think the one great thing about not the one great thing, but one great thing about Marcus Freeman is the transparency he has with his players in this day and age when it's really important to have it, so that there shouldn't be surprises from the player standpoint.
Yeah, I don't think like the last couple practice. Now, obviously, injuries could be the biggest thing that would throw things for a loophole potentially. Like, what happens if I'm the fourth tight end and all of a sudden one of the tight ends ahead of me gets injured? Then maybe I'd be like, you know what, I'm going to stay. Or I'm just saying things as hypotheticals, not anything else. But so yeah, I think it could make it a little bit more complicated, but like Eric said, these guys know where they're at. The last couple of practices of spring probably aren't going to change dramatically your position on the team. You're probably going to have a pretty good sense of that.
And the portal still will be open when Marcus speaks to us and practice is over. So there will still be a few days left.
Yeah, and it's not as like it's seemingly more urgent in the winter because you got to get into classes sooner.
Right.
Whereas you wouldn't, like, if you're enrolling in the summer, you got till June to get into your next school, so you have more time than you do in the winter. All right, Eric Swope says your MVPs on offense and defense for Saturday's game, and Beefeater asked who was going to win the Junior Jabby Blue and Gold MVP award.
I'll say Aeneas Williams on offense, and it's usually somebody that's not a starter on defense. Should have been Kia last year, Kahanu Kia. I will go with Kingston Viliamuasa on defense, although he's kind of a starter. That's cheating. Stop it. Okay. I will go with Kennedy Urlacher.
All right. I was thinking linebacker too. I'll go with Preston Zinter on defense. Someone who is a veteran and I think will be able to get through things and make plays when he's out there. And I think he'll have some opportunities to do that. But I think you could probably name a number of linebackers that could be candidates for defensive MVP.
Beyond those, curious too how quick the refs blow the whistle on sacks, because like there was one spring where Dalen Hayes had like 27 sacks.
Yeah. Bryce Young could get a lot of sacks in the Blue Gold game if their whistle blows pretty early. So offensively, give me Jack Larson. A tight end will get some opportunities in the passing game. So I'm going to go with Jack Larson as an upset pick there.
Okay. I think that's closer to Junior Jabby than if he's the MVP.
All right. I think those are maybe there's some more questions that came in here. Let me look through those. I think they're just talking. Matt McCarthy. Do you think Notre Dame will reach out to Emmett Mosley? It has been pretty quiet since he entered the portal.
I think I got asked it in chat. I didn't see it as, I mean, you couldn't guarantee that he would be starting. I think he'd want to go someplace or he could walk right in and be a starter.
Yeah, I think if you're Notre Dame, I don't think you can expend a lot of energy on it. He's passed on Notre Dame once before. His brother has passed on Notre Dame. And yeah, despite Notre Dame needing to be better at receiver, I'm not sure that he is the type of receiver that Notre Dame lacks in terms of probably being a slot guy. And I think Notre Dame has good depth there.
Okay.
Another question from Matt McCarthy. Do you think Jabron Pade could see some time in the slot? He played some slot receiver in high school, and with the depth of running back, he could still help the team by being on the field.
I mean, where are his reps going to come from? Because you have Pauling there, you have Greathouse there, you have Logan Saldate there. It looks like Scrap Richardson's moved over there. So I don't know that there are reps for him. And if you're going to throw a slot out there, I would put Jeremiah Love in the slot.
Right.
And he has done a lot of wide receiver drills? I mean, I think it's a good question, man. I'm just telling you what the numbers look like.
All right. That's it for questions.
Okay. Well, now we're moving on to Tyler's wheelhouse, and that's recruiting. There's a big announcement Thursday regarding four-star edge prospect Rodney Dunham from North Carolina. What is your sense there, Tyler?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame's in a good spot. I put in a future cast for him earlier this month. I think it was this month. He's a number 11 edge defender, number 127 overall in the 2026 class. So that would be a good addition for Notre Dame, especially coming off a good addition that it landed on Saturday.
Notre Dame over the weekend got a verbal commitment at practice from Ebenezer, and I'm going to butcher this, so get ready to correct me, Iwatade, a four-star edge prospect from Garner, North Carolina. How big of a get is this? How badly did I butcher his name? And is Al Washington picking it up in recruiting?
I think you got his name right. It's someone that Notre Dame is very high on. He has very intriguing potential as a bit of a raw pass rusher. Very long and tall prospect, more of a Viper, whereas I think Dunham may end up as a defensive end. But Notre Dame's doing really well in defensive line recruiting right now. Like you mentioned, Al Washington has things rolling. And for rankings perspective, Iwatade is listed as the number 15 edge defender and number 218 overall in the class, according to Rivals.
Okay, and then what's of note coming up on the recruiting front? It seems like Notre Dame is starting to pick it up. What's up next that you want to highlight?
Yeah, so they'll get some more visitors in this week, some big-time guys, I think. Let me see what the names are. Defensive tackle Tiki Hola, running back Jonas Walton, offensive tackle Felix Oho, wide receiver Braden Robinson. Those are guys that are planning to visit later this week. A number of targets have commitment dates planned. Tiki Hola's for May 10th, linebacker Tayon King, July 4th, safety Nick Reddish, July 11th. I don't necessarily think that those guys have their decisions yet, but they're at least putting themselves on a bit of a self-imposed timeline, want to have things wrapped up. So I think Notre Dame's in solid position for all three of those. I would probably order them as Hola, Reddish, and King in terms of most likely to be in Notre Dame's class. I do have a future cast in for Notre Dame with Tiki Hola. Today, like I mentioned, or I don't think I've mentioned this yet, there was an update of the Rivals 250 for the 2026 class. So you check that out if you want. I highlighted a number of targets that Notre Dame is after who jumped up. Joey O'Brien being maybe the most notable. He's up to number 130 overall. He jumped up 100 spots in the rankings update from last month to this month. So Notre Dame's starting to pick up speed here with recruiting, and I think it's going to continue that way. Notre Dame needed to get things rolling with spring practices and get guys back on campus to build this momentum. And it looks like Notre Dame's taking full advantage of it right now.
Okay. Braden Robinson is a guy I got to interview. I really liked. I wanted him to put his parents on so I could thank them for raising such a nice kid, but he's a really talented receiver as well.
All right. Yeah. And I've yet to put together an intel piece about last week's visitor. I'm hoping to do that either late tonight and have it up on the homepage by early tomorrow. So look for that if you're a subscriber to us at InsideNDSports.com. If you're not, use promo code NDYT for a 30-day free trial. Make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube. Hit the like button. We appreciate all the comments. Eric, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Look for our post-game takeaways after the Blue Gold game on Saturday. Football Never Sleeps next Monday, and lots of content throughout the week.
All right. Everyone have a good week.